Let's get to that. President Trump met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on Monday during the G7 summit. The two leaders reportedly committed to pursuing a trade deal within the next month. Also on Monday, Democratic Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts hosted a meeting in Boston with other governors from the Northeast and Canadian premiers for their own strategic talks. And Governor Healey joins us now. Maura, it's great to see you. So tell us about these conversations and what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, well, great to be with you. And I just want to say, Brad Marchand, the Boston Bruin, also Nova Scotian from Canada, now a Stanley Cup winner once again. So not all is lost for our Canadian friends. You know, look, this is serious stuff. You know, everyone knows that Canada is our greatest trading partner, and that's certainly true in the Northeast. And, you know, given what Donald Trump was doing with tariffs and other things, I thought it was important to get a group of us together. So I invited Governor Hochul from New York, the other New England governors, to meet with Canadian premiers in Boston the other day to talk about how we can move forward with our own relationships, our own partnerships around trade, around energy supply, around tourism, for example. And so we had a really good conversation in Boston. We're going to continue that. It was important that, to me, that we affirm Canada is an ally here and we are stronger working together. I hope and would hope that Donald Trump cleans up the mess he made and reaches a deal with Mark Carney. But in the interim, we can't wait, and we need to do everything that we can as governors to make sure that that relationship is made stronger and that we're working to protect our residents and our businesses and our local economies.
So, Governor, speaking of local economies, I've heard governors from Florida to Maine, business leaders, and community leaders from Florida to Maine, very concerned about the loss of Canadian tourism. I know of several people from Canada who have left Florida, sold their homes, sold their condos, moved out of Florida and gone back to Canada. I'm curious, is Massachusetts feeling right now any sting from some of the back and forth between President Trump and Canada over the past 6 months? What's happening with tourism? Is it slowing down for you like it is for other states?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Joe, that was the consensus of all the governors. We've seen a drop in our states of between 20 and 60%. 20 and 60% drop in Canadian tourism in our states alone. And we're only in June. So that's really devastating. You know, I also know that Canadian flights, people into and out of Boston from Canada, are also down. We've heard the stories about Florida. This is a serious issue for us. And, you know, it's real. The feeling on the part of Canadians, you know, that took tremendous offense, of course, to being labeled the 51st state by our president, are making decisions to spend their tourism dollars elsewhere. So part of what we were trying to do the other day, Joe, is just to say, hey, you know, we're still open for business. Remember, we're your friends. We're your neighbors. We have such close cultural and familial ties with the Canadians here in the Northeast, and we wanted to do everything that we could to cement that. But that's a big problem. Tourism is a huge problem economically. I'll tell you the other issue. We're trying to build housing here in the Northeast. All of our lumber comes from Canada. The tariffs are raising the cost of building housing in my state and in states around the Northeast. And the last point on energy, what he's done with tariffs, we estimate that people's home heating and gas bills are going to go up an additional $2.5 billion over the next few years. That's what folks in New England are going to be forced to pay. Donald Trump is taxing us an additional $2.5 billion with his Canadian tariffs on energy alone. And so, you know, serious economic consequences for our residents, for our businesses, and for the regional economy.
So, Governor, what impact has all of that had on Massachusetts business, if any? That plus immigration raids in the state of Massachusetts affecting employment. What impact has it had?
Yeah. Well, look, you know, Mike, I'm somebody who grew up waitressing on a at a coastal town, and I could tell you the hits to hospitality in Massachusetts, hotels, restaurants, numbers are down with Canadian visits dropping, and that means we're looking at lost jobs as servers and staff get laid off because they're not bringing in what they did. That kind of thing hurts a lot. You talk to suppliers. I convened a number of our manufacturers recently around the state, and you think about a lot of the materials and raw materials that come from Canada. Aluminum, for example. We've got a big craft beer industry here. Where do you think our cans come from? This hurts, and people are seeing the consequences, both in terms of end users, consumers, paying more for these goods, but also these companies can't make it work with the cost of their supplies increasing. They just can't make the math work, and that means layoffs here in Massachusetts and around the region. And it's just so the thing that's so upsetting is we've got any number of things we're trying to manage in the world and deal with, especially as governors right now with this big, awful, terrible bill out there that's going to gut funding for our nursing homes and our rural hospitals. And then to have to deal with a president who has effectively put a tax on all of our businesses, all of our residents and consumers through these tariffs, by the way, with our best friend and ally, it's ludicrous. So as governors, we figured, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can work out for our own deals and our own relationships. What can we do to have a cable come from the north and eastern Canadian provinces down into New England to bring us the energy that we need? How can we work out deals around tourism and trade, even if the president can't get his act together with the prime minister? This is the attitude I think we need to have right now, because we've got to forge ahead and make things work for our residents and make things work.
We are Canadians who have not seen snow in 4 years.
Except for now.
It's snowing outside right now.
And I'm not happy.
Snowbirds Gary and Carol Cruz travel to the U.S. each year for 5 months at a time to escape the frigid Canadian winters.
We've stayed in every state east of the Mississippi in our motorhome.
The Cruzes are also huge Disney fans. They canceled plans for 2 trips this spring to Disney World and Disneyland after President Trump imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, some of which have been briefly paused. The couple has traditionally spent more than $30,000 a year on U.S. vacations, but they're hitting the brakes.
We love our American friends, and we love your country. We have seen almost all of your country. This is really horrible. This is upsetting.
Trump has repeatedly called the Canadian Prime Minister governor and suggested making Canada the 51st state. He says Canada has been, quote, ripping off the United States.
We've never had an issue with any individual in the U.S., but we are furious and horribly insulted by the lack of respect and demeaning comments coming out of the Oval Office. It is like we've been gut punched by our best friend the last month. The way we shop is different. The way our stores look is different. We examine labels, and if something says made in the USA, it goes back on the shelf. We're voting with our wallets. We are shopping differently.
Instead of using their Disney World annual passes to return in April, Gary Cruz says he's picking up his RV in Florida and driving it home for who knows how long. They still haven't canceled their November trip to stay in the U.S. for the winter months. They hope by then that not only will tariffs be lifted, but that leaders come to a respectful understanding without unpredictable threats of more tariffs in the future.
We're healthy right now, but we don't have a long-term expectation of being able to continue what we're doing. That's the reality of getting old. I don't want it to end like this.
Sterling Morse in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. He owns the Point of View Inn, which is only about 150 miles from the Canadian border.
We have been here.
He says the majority of his regular customers are French Canadians.
Very traditional people, families that take the same room, the same dates every year.
Not this year. Sterling says most of his Canadian customers have canceled, fed up with President Donald Trump's antagonistic rhetoric toward Canada. There's the threat of tariffs, too, and lately Trump has suggested redrawing the border between the two countries.
It's affecting at least 90% of my business.
Are you saying you've had 90% of your business canceled this year?
Easily.
Point of view in.
During our visit, yet another Canadian called to cancel.
Listen, monsieur, you don't need to explain anymore.
This is every registration card from last year. This is the Canadian. That's my American. This just went away.
That's all you got now. That doesn't pay the bills.
Does not.
Best of my ability.
For Sterling Morse, it all snowballed shortly after Donald Trump's inauguration.
All of a sudden an email pops up. It's almost like, your phone, ding, ding, slow ding. People that have been here for 35, 40 years, you recognize that number. And it's like, I know why they're calling. And the anger is, in my eyes, incredibly justified.
Here in Old Orchard Beach, roughly 40% of the tourists come from Canada, according to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber's executive director told us that those tourists make up about 30 to 40% of the revenue for many of the businesses here.
I think we're still kind of seeing how many different industries this impacts. It doesn't just impact tourism.
What's really interesting about what's happening in Canada is that our prime minister is sort of bending the knee to Trump. Now, I know you're going to, in the comments, there's going to be some liberal voters from Canada who are going to say, well, that's not fair to Carney, blah, blah, blah. He's the greatest guy, blah, blah, blah. He's sort of bending the knee to Trump. He's parroting Trump on Iran-Israel. Both of them are making the ridiculous line that Israel, who bombed Iran, is the one acting in self-defense. Carney and Trump are sounding exactly the same. Basically endorsing what's happening. But also, Carney wants to be part of Golden Dome and all of that. So what's really fascinating is that the pressure on Trump to reduce tariffs and whatnot is actually coming from regular working and middle-class Canadians, like some of the people watching or some of your family and friends north of the border. Because Canadians aren't going to the States right now. They're not. And that's a big thing. Tourism from Canada is a big part of the U.S. economy, and in specific states and in specific regions of those states, it's the economy. It's a major, major part of the economy. It makes and breaks entire communities. And those communities are struggling because Canadians aren't going. And they are begging, and a lot of those people are business people, capitalists, the sort of people that Trump actually does care about. Not the workers, not the actual people on the ground, but the business people. Trump's worried about them because that's who his base actually is, the capitalist class, right? And they are pressuring Trump, saying, your moves are hurting our business. And again, this is working from working class Canadians, middle class Canadians not going, because you see ads from California, from Illinois, from major U.S. cities being like, please, for the love of God, visit. We don't like Trump either. Please visit us. We are dying without you. Please visit. Canadians are still saying no. Why? Because one, he's the president of the whole country, so a lot of us are saying we don't want to go because it's the whole country. But also, just from a practical perspective, even if California is perfectly fine to visit on the ground, you still have to go through border security. And that is Trump land, right? Even if you fly in from Toronto to LA, that's still Trump land when you cross the border when you get off the plane. So fundamentally, guys, Canadians, more than our prime minister, who is bending the knee to Trump at least a little bit, are the ones putting pressure on Trump.